Hey, thanks for joining us on Deep Dive. Each week we're going to dive deep into the sermon that we heard on Sunday. This past week I talked from Nehemiah chapter 5, and I talked about how to keep your heart aligned with God's. And we talked about having the courage to reflect, the courage to confront, and the courage to adjust. But the question is, how do you do this, right? Isn't that always the question we have at the end of the sermon? How do we actually apply this to our life so that it's not just I hear it on Sunday, but then I forget it on Monday, right? But we want to go deep into this. And so I want to talk to you about how we do this. And we're going to do it by going actually backwards through the text in Nehemiah chapter 5. So how do we reflect? Well, I looked at the last verse in chapter 5. And it says this, it says, "Remember, O God, all that I have done for these people and bless me for it." Right? So Nehemiah has this posture of prayer, which Lisa talked about a number of weeks ago. And this prayer posture is really what leads Nehemiah to get to this place where he says early in the chapter that he was very angry, right? He hears about the trouble that's going on, that the rich are exploiting the poor, charging unreasonable interest rates. And Nehemiah gets very angry. And what leads him to reflect is because he always has this posture of prayer. He creates space in his life in order to encounter Jesus and to process the events in his life with Jesus. That's why he says that when he heard their complaints in verse 6, I was very angry. And after thinking it over, I responded. And so if you're going to reflect, you have to create space in your life to actually process what's going on with Jesus. Here's how I do it. Let me give you an example. I have a dashboard of my soul. Okay, so what this is that in my iPad, I have a program called GoodNotes, and I use it to actually do my journaling. And now I'm not a big journaler. I know pastors talk about journaling, and they say everybody should be journaling, right? I hate journaling. I mean, hate. I once, when I was in college, I had to do an assignment where I had to write about journaling, and I had to do a journal, and so I chose to journal about how much I hated journaling. So that's how much I don't like it. But a dashboard, I have little circles that measure certain things in my life, and I color in those circles with red, yellow, or green to give an indication on how I did the day before. I'm reflecting on my day. I'm using that moment, because if I'm coloring something in red in there, then I'm saying, Jesus, what's going on within my soul? And so you could do this, you could just have like a few circles, like maybe 4 circles. One, that's your physical, right? How did you do? Did you work out yesterday? Do you eat well, right? Color that in. Was it green? Was it red? Was it yellow? Second is you could do your relational, right? Was there a conflict that you're in, or are you holding a grudge against someone? And color that in. And then emotional and spiritual, and just kind of work through it and take some space to talk with Jesus about it. The dashboard is really just a mechanism that I use. And if there's a warning light, it means that I need to spend some time processing it with Jesus. So that's the first thing. How do we confront, right? When I looked at this, there's a statement that Nehemiah makes in verse 13. He says, I shook out the folds of my robe. I shook out the folds of my robe. You know, I have this habit of eating on my couch, right? And when the other night I was eating a cookie that my daughter-in-law made for me, and I was getting crumbs all down the front of my shirt. And when I stood up, all of the folds that had naturally been there as I was sitting down straightened out, and all of a sudden all these crumbs fell down to the floor. This is what Nehemiah is talking about. He's saying that I'm going to confront the behaviors in my life in such a way that there are no crumbs left over from it. I'm going to shake out the folds of my robe. And when we have the courage to confront, it means I'm going to get not just at the surface issue that's dealing there, that I'm going to get deep down at the roots. I'm going to find the root cause of what's going on within me. And if you're going to actually change and align your heart with Jesus, you're going to have the courage to shake out the folds of your soul and deal with the deep issues. And the only way you do that is by creating space to actually process what's going on with Jesus and listening to him like we did on Sunday. The last one is adjusting, right? You know, in verse 4, Nehemiah says this. Actually, it's the poor in Jerusalem saying this. It says, we have had to borrow money on our fields and vineyards to pay our taxes. In the NIV, it says, we have had to borrow money in order to pay the king's taxes. And here's the thing, we talked a little bit about this on Sunday, is that there is a culture that we belong to, and there's another culture that we grew up in. As Christ followers, we belong to the culture of the kingdom of God, but we grew up in another kingdom with another culture. And so when we look at Nehemiah 5, it really is, based on verse 4, a clash of cultures going on here. There is the culture that's established by the king that Nehemiah actually was empowered to go to Jerusalem for and is actually charging taxes. And then there is the culture of King Jesus, or God, in Nehemiah that is in conflict with the king of the day. And we're going to have to make choices that adjust. And we're going to have to be ruthless. We're going to have to shake off the robes, shake out the folds of our robes in order to deal with the culture that is in conflict there. And we're going to have to choose to follow King Jesus into the culture that he's establishing. And this is going to be hard and difficult. And the way that we do that is by every day making space to process our day. Here's one of the ways that I do it. I take my calendar and I actually pray through every single appointment that I have. And so today I sat in an executive team meeting and I said, Jesus, as we go through the issues in there, help me to see this issue the way you see it. I had another one, a pastoral team meeting, and prayed through the items on the agenda there. And I just go through my day. And it may be I have a coffee appointment or maybe I'm having a lunch appointment. I just pray through my calendar. And I surrender my calendar to King Jesus, not to the kingdom of busyness in our life. And I think we need to do that with our bank accounts. I think we should go through our bank accounts on a monthly basis and actually say, was this item actually part of surrender to Jesus, or was this actually part of the culture of St. Albert? And so there's lots of ways we can do this, but it's processing your life in such a way that your heart stays aligned with Jesus. Too often we leave this for Sundays. But here's the thing, we need to do this on Monday. We need to do this on Tuesday. This is a 7-day-a-week practice of processing life with Jesus. That's how you keep your heart aligned with Jesus in the long run. Thanks for joining us for Deep Dive. I hope this was meaningful. If you have any thoughts, leave us some comments or some questions. Would love to get back to you about this. And join us next week for Deep Dive. Till then.